My name is Brian. I'm 44. People think silence is peace. But they've never lived inside a house where silence isn't calm. It's camouflage. 5 years ago, I married Lauren. It wasn't a loud wedding. Just family. No dancing. No band. She didn't want attention. She wore white, but her eyes didn't light up. They looked past me, like the aisle stretched somewhere else, to someone who never showed. The photographer took photos. She didn't smile in most of them. She had a son, Zach, 13 at the time, and I knew what that meant. I knew what I was stepping into. A life that was already written in another man's handwriting. I wasn't coming to replace anyone. I wasn't coming to fix what wasn't broken. I came to build, quietly, from the corners, from the nails upward. Lauren moved into my house, but it became hers. I didn't fight it. She picked the wall colors, grays and soft greens. She moved my books off the shelves, made room for framed photos of Zach and his dad. There was one from when Zach was 6, holding a fish, beaming at the camera. I caught her staring at it sometimes, not smiling, just remembering. Zach didn't speak much to me. The first time we met, he asked if I liked sports. I said I didn't watch much. That was the end of it. After that, he avoided eye contact like it was contagious. He'd walk through the living room while I was fixing something and never say a word. I offered to help with his homework once. He said, "I'm fine." Always polite, but always at a distance. At dinner, he passed dishes across me without looking. "Can you hand me the bread?" To Lauren, never to me. I was something he reached around like furniture in the way. The house felt colder than it was, even with the heater on. Still, I told myself, grief is a second language. Maybe Zach was just learning to speak it. Maybe he didn't hate me. Maybe he just didn't know where to place me in the story he'd been living. So I did what I knew how to do. I worked. The roof needed fixing. I climbed up, spent a weekend hammering shingles in the cold. No one asked. I did it because it was leaking. Because that's what you do when you love a house, even when it doesn't love you back. Zach needed new glasses. Lauren mentioned it once in passing. Money was tight that month. I picked up an extra shift at the plant and covered the bill. No one asked me to. He came home with them, said they were fine. Lauren didn't say thank you. Not because she was cruel. Just maybe because she thought that was my job. He had a history project once, Civil War battle maps. I spent 2 nights cutting paper, drawing tiny figures, helping him glue miniature forts onto cardboard. He got a B. The teacher left a note that said, "Strong visual effort." He handed it to Lauren. I stood in the doorway and watched. She patted his shoulder. No one mentioned my name. I told myself not to care. That real love doesn't keep score. That fathers show up even when they're not invited. That being there would count for something in the end. But years passed, and the silence only sharpened. Zach joined track. I bought his first pair of running shoes, a good brand, not cheap. Lauren said, "He'll outgrow them fast." I said, "He deserves decent footing." I drove him to every meet, sat on cold bleachers, clapped quietly when his name was called. He never looked at me. After one meet, he ran straight to his mom and said, "Did Dad see that?" She said, "He's not here, sweetie." No mention of me, the man holding the camera, the man who'd driven him through traffic, the man who'd clapped for a boy who wouldn't look him in the eye. By senior year, I stopped expecting gratitude. I stopped waiting for recognition. I became a quiet part of the house, like insulation in the walls. Unseen, but necessary. At least that's what I told myself. There was one winter the pipes froze, burst in the basement. I spent 2 nights under that house, surrounded by cold and mildew, torching joints, replacing valves. I didn't sleep. I missed work. I came up covered in grime. Lauren made me tea. Zach walked in, saw the mess and said, "Mom, why didn't we just call someone?" That one stung more than I expected. There were moments, slivers, where I thought I saw cracks in the wall. Once, Zach left his iPad in my truck. I brought it to his room. He looked surprised. Said, "Thanks." Just that. One syllable. It echoed louder than anything else that year. But the next morning, it was like it hadn't happened. Another time, I found him crying in the garage. Something about a girl, a breakup. I didn't ask. I just sat on the steps with him. Neither of us spoke. I handed him a soda. We sat for an hour in the cold. When he got up, he muttered, "I'll be fine." That was it. But those moments never grew roots. At a school fundraiser, the announcer thanked the parents and families who supported our seniors. Lauren clapped. Zach clapped. I stood there, the man who'd bought the silent auction basket, the man who'd fixed the gym's broken bleachers. No one clapped for me. I thought it would get better with time, that maybe college would give him distance, and in that space he'd see things differently. That maybe one day he'd look back and realize who stood beside him. Not in name, but in effort. Not in blood, but in every other way that counts. But instead, it got worse. I was filling out insurance forms one evening. Needed his information. I asked him to check a date. He looked at the paper and said, "Why do you even need me for this? Isn't this stuff for parents?" I stared at him. "I'm on your policy." He shrugged. "Guess mom added you." And just like that, 5 years disappeared. Every gift, every ride, every bill, every sacrifice. Erased with a shrug. The next week, we were at the table, me, Lauren, Zach. I don't remember the meal, just the quiet. Lauren asked about his college applications. He said he'd sent them out. I asked, "Do you need help with anything?" "Essays, maybe?" I was a decent writer. Could have helped. He didn't answer right away. Then he looked straight at me and said, flat as cement, "You're just mom's husband." No anger, no spite, just truth as he saw it. It wasn't the words that hit me. It was the ease. Like he'd been waiting to say it. Like he'd said it in his head 100 times and finally let it out. Lauren didn't flinch. She didn't defend me. She looked down at her plate. I nodded. Didn't say a word. Didn't raise my voice. But something in me stopped moving. It wasn't pain. Not exactly. It was recognition, cold and full. I wasn't misunderstood. I wasn't waiting for my turn. I wasn't going to be accepted in time. I was extra. A shadow cast by someone else's name. A man tolerated for what he provided, not who he was. Fixture. Useful. Silent. Replaceable. That night, I lay in bed beside Lauren. I could hear her breathing. I wanted to ask her, "Do you believe that too?" But I didn't, because deep down I already knew her answer. The house didn't change after that dinner. Zach said his piece. Lauren didn't object. And I didn't make a scene. That's how most things ended in that house. Quietly. Not with shouting, not with slammed doors. Just silence. The kind that sits on your chest while you pretend to sleep. I went back to work the next morning like nothing happened. Put in 10 hours at the site. Came home to lukewarm leftovers and muted television. Zach was in his room. Lauren folded laundry with the kind of practiced numbness that only comes from years of quiet disappointments. I still paid the bills. I still fixed the leaky sink. I still showed up. But something had shifted. Not in them, in me. I stopped expecting things I once hoped for. A contact. Invitations. Warmth. Instead, I moved through the house like a man passing through an old job. Familiar, but finished. A few years passed like that. Zach graduated college, cum laude even. I'd helped pay for half of it. Lauren covered the rest with her savings and 2 personal loans I never asked about. Zach didn't thank me. Not once. At the ceremony, he shook hands with professors and posed for photos with his mom. I held the camera. He didn't ask me to be in a single shot. After the ceremony, we went to a diner, Zach, Lauren, and me. He ordered a burger. Talked about job offers in vague, confident tones. I listened. Said nothing. When the check came, I paid it. Of course I did. He never made eye contact. 6 months later, he got engaged. Her name was Megan. Polite, sweet, always smiled. She didn't know what house she was walking into. She sent us a card, handwritten, thanking us for dinner the first time she visited. It sat on the kitchen counter for a week. I never touched it. Couldn't. Not because I disliked her, but because it was the first written thank you I'd seen in over a decade, and it came from someone who owed me nothing. Lauren started buzzing around like she used to. Baking, list-making, phone calls at night. She asked Zach about venues, colors, photographers. She never once said we, just me and Zach. I noticed. She mentioned having a rehearsal dinner. Something small, cozy. Just a warm-up, she said. Not a big deal. I told her I'd take care of it. I booked the venue. A little place by the lake, soft lighting, long wooden tables, string lights hanging from the rafters. I ordered catering, his favorite barbecue place. I rented a projector to play slides of his childhood. I even spent an afternoon digging through old photo albums, the ones with his dad in them, scanning every picture I could find. I did it all without being asked, because that's what I'd always done. The day before the event, I came home from work late. There was a letter on the kitchen table, thick paper, gold trim, the kind of envelope you reserve for real guests. It was an invitation, addressed to Lauren Miller and guest. My name wasn't on it. I stared at it for a long time, long enough for the house to go still. I didn't move, just kept reading the curve of those two words, and guessed, as if repetition would soften the blow. When Lauren walked in, she froze. "You're home early," she said, even though I wasn't. I held up the envelope. "Is this how it is now?" She looked down, didn't answer. Then Zach's voice came from behind her. Calm, practiced, already halfway to corporate cold. "You're not part of the family planning. Why would you be part of a family event?" That's all he said. No heat, no cruelty, just words, cut clean from whatever script he carried inside. I didn't reply. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the table, didn't throw the envelope, didn't ask Lauren to defend me. I just walked to my office, sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and I emailed the venue, cancel the deposit. They responded, confused, asking if I wanted to reschedule. I told them no, that I wouldn't need the space. That night, I left my dinner in the microwave. The next evening, when Zach's friends and extended family showed up for the rehearsal, half the tables were missing. No projector, no music. The catering never arrived. Guests stood around with confused smiles, waiting for something that never came. I didn't attend. I wasn't invited. Later, I heard they ordered pizzas. Megan's dad gave a half-hearted toast. Zach didn't say anything about it. Not to me, not to Lauren. Just brushed it off like the weather. After that night, everything between Lauren and me collapsed. Not with arguments, but with avoidance. We started living like roommates who split the groceries. She didn't ask where I went during the day. I didn't ask why her phone never left her hand. There was no confrontation, no fight, just layers of withdrawal, peeling back one dinner at a time. But while she grieved in silence, I worked in mine. I started pulling papers. Bills, receipts, tuition records. I opened old spreadsheets and tallied everything I had paid over the last decade: braces, dorm fees, car repairs, textbooks, gas cards, doctor visits. Each line felt like a scar. I kept going anyway. Then I started closing doors. First, the college fund, a small account I'd been contributing to monthly even after Zach graduated. Gone. I transferred the balance into my own emergency savings. Next, the auto insurance. I called the provider, removed him from the plan. When they asked why, I said, "He's no longer under my protection." Then, the emergency credit card, the one Lauren used whenever Zach needed something last minute. Frozen. A week passed. Then Lauren knocked on the door of my office. She didn't look me in the eye. "We need $900, she said, "for the wedding photos." I asked, "Why?" She hesitated. "They're good. Megan loves them." I nodded. "Am I in them?" She blinked. "What? Am I in the pictures?" "No. I don't think so. It was mostly family." I nodded again. "Then I'm not in the budget." She didn't argue. She just walked away. 3 days later, I got an email. From Zach. Short. No greeting. No sign-off. "You owe it to us. You were part of this life." I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, "Send the invoice to the person in the frame." I never heard back. But the next day I got a call. It was Jason, Zach's biological father. The man who hadn't paid for a single dentist appointment. The man who'd vanished for 10 years and reappeared just in time for graduation pictures. The man Zach still called Dad. "Don't be petty," he said. "This is a big day. Be the bigger man." I looked out the window. The yard I had mowed for a decade was covered in leaves. "You want to be Dad?" I said. "Then here's the bill." I mailed a box. Inside, receipts, statements, scanned documents. Every expense I'd ever eaten. On top, one note: "This is the price you ignored. Make sure the next guy knows the terms." A week later, I saw a declined payment attempt on one of my old cards, the frozen one. Someone had tried to buy a tuxedo. I didn't ask who. Then came the letter. From Lauren's attorney. Quiet threats in cursive fonts. They claimed I'd created a precedent of ongoing support. That my financial help had set a legal expectation. That I couldn't just stop now. My lawyer sent one sentence in return. "Voluntary generosity is not legal obligation. Silence is also an answer." We heard nothing after that. Until the GoFundMe. A link, sent to me anonymously. "Help us cover the wedding costs." A photo of Zach and Jason. Smiling. No mention of me. One comment read, "Where's your stepdad? He used to post about you all the time." By morning, the post was gone. And so was I, from every photo, every tag, every caption. Years of pictures I'd taken. Family trips, birthdays, graduations, still online. But cropped, edited, rewritten. My name wasn't just forgotten. It was erased. That's when I knew. This wasn't just rejection. It was removal. And I wasn't just a ghost now. I was never supposed to have existed. 2 days after the GoFundMe vanished, the phone rang. It was him, Jason, Zach's biological father. The man who once showed up to Christmas dinner in a leather jacket and laughed too loudly at his own stories. The man who hugged Lauren like he still had the right. Who left again before New Year's and didn't call until the following November. "Hey," he said like we were old friends. "I saw what's going on. Zach told me you've been cutting things off. Look, I get it, emotions are high. But come on, man. This is a big day. Be the adult." I looked out the window. The same window I'd watched Zach drive off from. The car I co-signed for. The one he never thanked me for. It was raining. Cold, steady. The kind of rain that makes the ground soft enough to bury things in. "I am being an adult," I said. He laughed like I was joking. "You don't need to make this some power thing." I let the silence breathe. Then I said, slowly, carefully, "You want the title? Take the tab." He went quiet, so I hung up. An hour later I boxed everything. Not belongings, proof. Every receipt, every wire transfer, every auto debit. Gas money, sports fees, SAT tutoring. Kept it all. Because part of me had always known this day would come. Not the betrayal, the audit. The tallying. The final, brutal math of love unreturned. At the top of the stack I wrote, "You want to be Dad? Here's what Dad paid." I mailed it to Zach. No return address. No note. Nothing else. A week later, I got an alert from the bank. Declined transaction. One of my frozen cards. The one Lauren used when Zach needed emergencies. Someone had tried to book a honeymoon suite in Maine. I let it bounce. They tried again the next day. Different vendor. Different state. I froze the entire account. Then I changed the passwords. All of them. Lauren's name was still attached to a few utilities. I left them on. It wasn't about petty revenge. I wasn't cutting wires. I was pulling back the hands I'd lent them, one finger at a time. Then came the letter. White envelope. Black ink. Thick stock. Lauren's name on the return corner. But the letter wasn't from her. It was from a lawyer. They were exploring legal avenues due to the sudden withdrawal of financial support. The words felt like threats dressed in church clothes. They leaned on terms like implied commitment, marital pattern, reasonable expectation. They made it sound like love was a subscription I'd forgotten to cancel. My lawyer responded with one sentence. "Voluntary generosity is not a legal obligation." And beneath that, Silence is also an answer. We mailed it back. Certified. That was the last time they tried to come through the front door. After that, they went digital. A second GoFundMe popped up 2 weeks later. This time, no photos. Just a sad little block of text. Young couple struggling after unexpected financial change. Trying to rebuild what was lost. Every bit helps. One of the comments read, "Didn't your stepdad help with everything? Where is he now?" It was deleted within the hour. That's when I knew what they were really doing. Not grieving. Not asking. Erasing. My name disappeared from captions. From posts. From digital footprints I had helped leave. I stopped showing up in birthday photos. Vacation albums. Zach's graduation shots. They kept the image, just not the memory. Like I'd never stood behind the camera. I wasn't being forgotten. I was being removed. I stopped logging into social media after that. There's a kind of ache that comes from watching your own ghost drift across other people's timelines. I didn't need to haunt their world. It had never been mine. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Handwritten this time. Megan's handwriting. Not Zach's. No return address. Just a note folded in soft, uncertain ink. He won't ask. But things are bad. The honeymoon's off. Tuition's overdue. Rent's piling up. I know it's not your job anymore. But if there's anything you can do, please. He's too proud to ask. There was a copy of a tuition invoice inside. Overdue. Final notice. Printed in red. I looked at the number. It was less than what I'd paid for Zach's braces. Less than the tax I'd paid on our last house. Less than what I once lent Lauren's brother when he needed to get back on his feet. I pulled out my checkbook. Wrote a check. Left the amount blank. On the memo line I wrote, "Ask someone who matters." Then I mailed it. Didn't seal it with bitterness. Didn't smile. Just closed the envelope and dropped it off like any other letter I'd sent to people I once loved. 2 days later, Lauren stood in the doorway of my office. She hadn't been in that room in months. "You really sent him a blank check?" she asked. I didn't look up. "You introduced me as just your partner," I said. "I followed your script." She didn't move. Didn't speak. She just stood there like she was waiting for the scene to change. For the moment to soften. But nothing softened anymore. That night, I heard her cry. Not loudly. Not for effect. Just a quiet, exhausted kind of crying. Like something had finally collapsed inside her, too. I didn't go to her. Not because I didn't care. But because I finally understood the difference between being needed and being used. I had been the light switch. The plumbing. The scaffolding. Invisible until I stopped working. A month later I left. No fight. No suitcase slammed shut. Just a note on the kitchen table. It read, "This wasn't a family. It was a job. Quit." I left the keys under the mat. Took my name off the joint accounts. Called the credit bureau. Redirected my mail. She never called. Neither did Zach. Neither did Jason. Not even Megan. And the silence, the same silence that once felt like punishment, started to feel like peace. Now I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. Small. Clean. No family photos. No second set of towels. No reminders. I don't wake up to slammed doors or whispered arguments behind drywall. I wake up alone. And that, somehow, feels lighter than waking up unwanted. No one calls me dad anymore. But no one sends me invoices either. And maybe that's enough. Because here's what I've learned. Sacrifice without recognition isn't love. The servitude. I thought silence would feel like an ending. But endings have clarity. Silence just lingers. After I left, I didn't hear from them. Not once. No calls. No emails. Nothing. Not even from Lauren. I'd spent years thinking I was building something permanent. A house, a family, a name that would echo when I was gone. But once I stopped paying, once I stopped showing up, they adapted like I'd never been part of the equation. I was a bridge they crossed until they reached the next chapter. Then they burned it for warmth. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Top floor. No elevator. The kind of place that forces you to live light. I brought what I needed. A bed, a desk, 3 pans, 2 chairs. Everything else I donated or left behind. Most of it never really felt mine anyway. The first few mornings, I woke up expecting the echo of footsteps. Zach used to slam his door at 6:45 a.m. Always running late, always blaming traffic, never once thanking me for warming the car. Lauren used to hum when she made coffee, off-key but soft. Now there was nothing, and I didn't miss them. I missed the version of myself who thought I mattered. I filled my days with work, overtime, weekends. I told myself it was good to stay busy. That money was better saved than spent on people who viewed me as optional. My phone stayed quiet. Sometimes I stared at the call log just to confirm. Nothing. Then, one afternoon, 2 months after I walked out, I got another envelope. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Inside a bill. Tuition. Overdue. Graduate school this time. Zach's name printed at the top, sharp and official. The total wasn't surprising. I'd already paid for 4 years of undergrad, 2 study-abroad programs, and 3 summers of unpaid internships. This was just the next invoice in a lifetime of unpaid gratitude. In the corner, a small handwritten note. Can you help? Zach's too proud to ask. No signature. No, thank you. No, how have you been? Just a debt and a request, the only language I was ever fluent in with that family. I stared at the bill for a long time. Then I folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and set it aside. I didn't rip it up. I didn't call Lauren. I didn't send an angry reply. Instead, I pulled out my checkbook, wrote a check, left the amount blank, wrote one sentence in the memo line, ask someone who matters. The next morning, I mailed it. That night, Lauren showed up. She didn't knock. She used to have a key. Now she had nothing. She stood in my doorway like someone who had finally arrived at the wrong address. Still wearing the same coat I bought her 2 winters ago. She looked tired, thin in a way that wasn't about weight, like parts of her had worn away in the silence. You really sent him a blank check? She asked. I didn't look up. That's what he asked for. She stepped inside, carefully, like the floor might fall out. He didn't ask. I shrugged. Then you did. Same script. Different actor. She closed the door behind her. Didn't sit. Just stood there, holding the air like it might break. You always had a choice, she said softly. I nodded. I know. I finally made it. She swallowed. You think this is what he deserves? I turned to her finally. Deserves? I think what we all got was what we made. She didn't respond. Her hands twisted in front of her like they were holding something invisible. I never meant to erase you, she said. But you didn't stop it either, I said. She looked down. Her silence was the closest she ever came to an apology. That night, I didn't offer her a drink. Didn't ask her to stay. She didn't ask to come in further. We stood there, 2 strangers in the house we never shared, surrounded by furniture that never belonged to her. She cried. Not loudly, just enough for her voice to shake. I didn't move. I owed her nothing more. A week later, I received a friend request from Megan, Zach's wife. I didn't accept it, but I looked at her page. Once. New profile picture. Her in a white dress. Him beside her, smiling like someone who'd never tasted struggle. The comments below were full of hearts and congratulations. One caught my eye. Where's your stepdad? He used to post about you all the time. No reply. 2 days later, the comment was gone. I logged out and never went back. Another week passed. Then, one morning, there was a knock at my door. Not Lauren. Not Megan. Zach. He looked older. Not by years, by weight. The kind of weight you carry when you realize the world doesn't run on credit. He didn't say hello. Didn't ask if it was a good time. He just stood there, holding the check, the blank one, folded in his hand like a confession. You really sent this? He asked. I nodded. He looked down at it, like it might vanish if he blinked. Why? He asked. I leaned against the doorframe. Because you finally treated me the way you always saw me, as optional, replaceable, unnecessary. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, Maybe because he finally understood. I didn't know, he said. Back then. You knew, I said. You just didn't care. He winced. I was a kid. You were 18 when you told me I wasn't part of the family. I was angry. I was there. He looked up, eyes wet, not from tears, from shame. I'm sorry, he said. I nodded. I know. He held out the check. I didn't cash it, he said. Didn't fill it out. I figured. He hesitated. Can we start over? I looked at him for a long time, looked past the face I'd watched grow, past the features that belonged to someone else's DNA. I thought about every school drop-off, every missed vacation, every check I wrote so he wouldn't feel the hunger I'd grown up with. Then I said, you don't start over with people you erased. You rebuild. And rebuilding costs more than tuition. He nodded. I'll work for it. I stepped back, held the door open. Then start by leaving, I said. Start by understanding what you broke. He didn't argue, didn't plead. He just nodded once and walked away. I closed the door behind him, gently, without bitterness. I haven't seen him since, but I haven't thrown the check away either. It sits in my desk drawer, blank, waiting, not as a promise, not as a threat, just a reminder that even when people take everything from you, you still get to choose the last word. I chose silence, not because I'm cruel, but because cruelty would have been easier. I chose absence, because I wanted them to feel the weight of it. Now I live alone. There's food in the fridge, a plant on the windowsill, a radio that plays the blues too loud on Sundays. And no one calls me Dad, but no one calls me for rent either. And maybe that's what peace really is, not being needed by people who never saw you. People talk about legacy like it's a plaque on a wall. Mine's a closed checkbook, a locked door, and a question. The only one I ask myself when I can't sleep. Was I wrong to walk away from a family that never let me in? Or would you have stayed? Would you have kept paying for a name no one gave you? Would you have endured it? Would you?